Hey everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, in the heart of College Town.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, from Tallahassee to Thomasville and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio. And it's a very happy Wednesday morning, January the 10th, to you and yours. You're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media at warchant.com. And as always, thanks for waking up with us here at 6 a.m. on 97.9 ESPN Radio, TuneIn Radio app, WTSM app, those streaming devices, our podcast, which is just about everywhere, iTunes, Podcast Republic, warchantradio.com, YouTube, all those different places. When you rate and subscribe to the show, give us a 5-star review, give us a good rating. It always helps, and we always appreciate it. We also appreciate when you subscribe to the show as well. Radio@warchant.com is your email address, @WakeUpWarChant, your Twitter account. Still planning on doing a Renegade Express later this week, so if you've got any questions, send them our way. Finally, our friends at For the Table help us get this thing done. Madison Social, Central, Township, all right there in the heart of College Town, and the Soto Baking Company in the heart of Midtown as well. Been driving a lot down Midtown lately, and I keep seeing Soto, and it's just at hours where I know I can't stop, and I keep wanting to stop because a donut sounds really, really good. But I am on the New Year's resolution diet, so knock on wood, it lasts. I hope it does. I'm trying to get in better shape. I hope everybody made some sort of resolution to better themselves or something this year. But enough about my personal life. Let's get talking some sports, shall we? This is a quick first segment, but I promise you, you're going to be just fine with that. And I know about half of you are saying, of course it's just fine with that. We don't want to hear you talk. We want to hear Gene and Adrian today. And hear Gene and Adrian you will. Gene's going to join us at the end of the show to talk his thoughts on the football national championship, Alabama, Georgia, and we take a look at the way too early top 25s for next year. Where do the Noles fall? Who are some of the big movers and shakers? Who are you buying? Who are you selling way too early before we even think about next football season? We're already thinking about next football season. And by the way, if basketball is your jammy jam, well, we've got Adrian Crawford on to help us preview Louisville, wrap up Miami a little bit. But if you're listening to us on radio, on the airwaves, on 97.9, and basketball is your thing, go listen to the podcast. We did literally 30 minutes with Adrian last night when I got to interview him, and we obviously couldn't fit it all in here because we get about 44 minutes of actual airtime of content. So if you like basketball, we ended up talking way more than FSU Louisville. We talked a little bit about facilities. We talked a little bit about the ACC as a whole, good and bad coaching hires. If that's your thing, make sure you're checking that out. But we're going to step aside, and we're going to play the edited down version of Adrian's interview after this on the radio. And then Mr. Gene Williams. It's all on the other end. It's Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio. Florida State basketball is good. I'm not taking anything away from this team. I think most people who listen to the show know that I was decently high on this team. But if there's one thing that going into this season until maybe some of the Adidas stuff started coming out, and that's a different discussion for another day, but Florida State has been installed as a 6-point, that's right, 2 from downtown shots, decent-sized favorite against the Louisville Cardinals at the Donald L. Tucker Center tonight, a 9 p.m. tip. God, I hate 9 p.m. tips, but at the TLC Double C, that's where it's all going to go down. Our own Adrian Crawford's, I'm assuming, I'm just assuming here. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm assuming, Adrian, you're going to be there for the proceedings this evening. And what a world we live in where Florida State can be favored comfortably. I consider two 3-point shots comfortably over the Louisville Cardinals.
Yeah, I will definitely be in the building, and I definitely think that is a comfortable kind of little spread there for the Noles.
So, with that being said, benefit of hindsight, since we were supposed to have you on Monday's show, we had an audio issue, just a couple different problems, so we had to push you back to today. But I did want to ask your thoughts on the Miami game, because I know not everybody's been able to get them. I'd assume they're pretty similar to what Ira and I ended up talking about on Monday, and it's that, listen, you never want to lose to Miami. You're not in the moral victories business. That's not what this program is about. And first of all, I think it's thrilling that this program is past the point of moral victories. But I think the good news for Florida State is the fact that Miami made 13 of their first 14 shots. They had a freshman who's averaging 7 points a game go into double figures and answer them with a huge bucket every time Miami needed them. Everything kind of went against Florida State in this game, and Florida State still had a chance to win with about 3 minutes to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Miami was in a space where, they were kind of desperate for a win. Miami came off a bad Georgia Tech loss. They hadn't played at home in a month. They had lost to Florida State 3 out of the last 4. So they were desperate for a win. And, especially last year when they played in Coral Gables, Florida State, it wasn't even a contest last year when they played. But so Miami was, you hate to say that they were more desperate than Florida State because you believe your team every time they step on the floor, they're going to be desperate for a win. But I think Miami came out guns blazing. And I think, if you look back at it, one of the things that Florida State, that Miami made, to Coach Larinaga, his staff credit, is they made the adjustments. Florida State, the last few years, just the way they play, they just are, that junkyard dog defense. These kids, they pick you up full court and they work you. And over the last, 3 or 4 contests, Miami struggled with Florida State's ball screen defense. So one of the things that Miami adjusted and did this time around was that they spread the floor. They set the ball screen a lot higher during this time. And what that led to is that Florida State just they tried to make some in-game adjustment. But when you're so used to just ramping it up every play and guarding, it was so hard for them to make those adjustments consistently. And so that's where they spread the floor off the ball screen. The young guard started going, and, that's what got Florida State. But again, you got Kamaje back, which was huge. But what's amazing, they make their first 13 or 14 shots in Florida State. If Chris Kamaje just turns and dunks the ball, it's a one-possession game. They get a steal and goal up. If he drives to the rim instead of shooting a 3, it's a one-possession game. So as bad as we played, we still were with a chance to win the ball game. So again, we're not into moral victories, but it was, it could have been a lot worse than what it was.
That was one of those things that made me chuckle about Florida State. Second chance points wise did not do a good job, especially considering all the offensive boards they had. But about 5 boards were on that one possession where Chris Kamaje keeps getting his own rebound. He keeps missing. Just dunk, big fella. Come on.
He did. He was trying to. I guess he's trying to pad them stats, trying to get himself back, get himself going again.
Who knows? But you have to move on, and you're hoping that you can end up 2-2 by the end of the evening. Of course, against the Louisville Cardinals, a team that you were able to defeat last year in a game that was absolutely thrilling. Florida State, of course, opened that game with a 16-0 run, and probably, I would say, Adrian, the loudest I've ever heard the Tucker Center. After they got up that big, sellout crowd. I know the student crowd at the very least is going to be pretty big tonight. This has the chance to be a really fun atmosphere. BPI says that Florida State has a 76.5% chance of winning this game. I think it's just kind of amazing. And I'm not saying that to say Louisville's got no shot, because Louisville's still got the players. Louisville's still really talented. And any night they can go off, they can flip a switch, and they can become Louisville again. But it's just kind of amazing to me to see what's become of this Card squad and how they were one of the favorites to win the whole thing coming into this season. And then, of course, the Rick Pitino allegations come out. He leaves the program, and things get shaken up a little bit. They have had a couple decent to bad losses. I wouldn't call Seton Hall a terrible loss. I'll say that 79-77 is what they lost to them. Lost to Purdue earlier in the year. They did get blown out by Kentucky. 90-61 ended up being that final in a game that never even really felt all that in doubt in the second half. As a matter of fact, Calipari put his kid in, if you want to know just how bad it got towards the end. But again, if you're a Louisville fan and you're listening to this, I'm not trying to hate on this. It's just, it's strange to see this out of Louisville. It's strange to see a game where they're kind of, well, a season really, where they're the hunter and not one of the hunted in the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what, man. I mean, you got to realize this. I know that we talk a lot about in sports, and that it's a lot about talent, about about having athletes, but I will tell you this. I mean, regardless of your thoughts about Rick Pitino, the guy can coach basketball. I mean, the guy can flat out coach basketball, and that lets you know how good of a coach he is, because there's still a lot of talent on that team, and the fact of the matter is the drop-off that's been there, it has to be with the fact of, I mean, again, the way he did it. You have to understand the way Rick Pitino coached. He was a guy who was very much so heavily involved in coaching. He just wasn't a guy who kind of was in the tower looking down. If you ever will watch a Louisville practice, Rick Pitino's mic, he had the speakers in there, and he's mic'd up the entire time. So he's not yelling as much, but he's got the speakers in there and he's mic'd up and he's coaching. I mean, the voice you're hearing was Rick Pitino's voice. So you go from a guy so involved, so heavily coaching his ball club to now you don't have that. And again, you get a 30-point loss to a not a great Kentucky team this year. And so again, they're reeling a little bit, but again, it's still Louisville and they still got pros on that team. So Florida State's got to be ready to play basketball.
Where Louisville sometimes fails is that they're not very good at getting each other the basketball. They're only averaging 13 assists per game. Would you care to guess what that's tied for in the country, Adrian?
But I would say it's tied for 200.
Close enough. 236 is what that's tied for. 127th in points per game, so that's 76.8 an outing. So Louisville just really having a hard time getting the ball in the right places and really being able to spread defenses out. And that's where I think Florida State can have a huge advantage in this game. Just like you mentioned, Miami had success against Florida State because they were able to spread that defense out, get a little bit of space to get some open looks. Meanwhile, this Louisville team just doesn't seem like they're as good as they have been in years previous doing that, especially when you realize Louisville's been good at getting the ball into tight spaces. They're not a team over the years, and Rick Pitino's MO was he had teams that were not going to shy away from contact. They were aggressive basketball teams, so it is kind of strange to see a Louisville team that's maybe not as good at placing the ball as you'd expect.
Yeah, I think that, this team, again, they're out there with some guys who are, so again, some high level, elite level talent. But again, they're not playing that Louisville, style basketball. I mean, tough nose, get up in you, press you. But again, a lot of times that's what led to a lot of the way they played. They just turned you over a lot. They beat you up on the glass a lot. And I think that, now, with this group, they're just, they're trying to find their way under a new coach and trying to figure out how to get it done.
Typically, when Florida State plays a team like a Louisville, what are some of the differences maybe when you're going up a team like this compared to some of the Rick Pitino teams of the past for Louisville? Some differences in the game plan based off what you've seen on film, if there are any, Adrian.
No, I mean, they still are going to play. I mean, they're going to pressure you. But the thing that they're not doing right now is that they always, Rick Pitino, Coach Pitino had just a way of finding a way to get his guys to just play. He was one of those guys where he could just his coaching style invoke players to just play and to play hard and to play tough. And right now, that's not what you're seeing. I mean, the kid Spalding, I think he's a first round kid. He's a pro. He is talented. So when you got a kid like that who can step on the floor at any point in time, they can help you. I mean, they're going to be long and athletic. They're going to, think Florida State's going to have to be prepared for is win the game. And here's what this game's going to come down to. Tonight, at the Tucker Center, it is going to be a street fight. It's going to be who can make the most tough plays. Whenever you play Louisville, it's just about who can make tough plays because they're going to come ready to play. And we have to be willing to come in and be willing to take the first swing and continue to keep punching them in the mouth. But whoever makes the tough plays tonight will be the team who ends up winning the basketball game.
So I was going to ask for a key, but it kind of seems like you've given it. It's about making tough plays. It's about those tough shots. I think Florida State's going to win this one tonight. I think it does end up, just look at it this way, teams aren't fouling with 10 seconds left. I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout, but I do think towards the end this gets a little comfortable. I think this could be a game maybe an 80-72 type affair. What say you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you're spot on. I actually think that this Florida State basketball team, I mean, it's hard to say because, again, with this group, there's still, I mean, we always have to remember, we do have a good group of sophomores and still young kids. And so they've responded well after losses this year. They've responded well. So I don't think anything's going to change. But if they respond the way I think they're going to respond, I actually think it'll be a double-digit win if they respond the way that they do. But again, we've got to get back to this. And again, this happened a little bit in Miami. We have got to get back to the place of attacking the rim, getting paint touches, and then spraying and playing from there. Get the ball in the paint, dive hard. Let's get it going to the rim first, and getting that ball movement. 200, like we've been saying, 250 to 300 passes a game. That Miami game, guys started taking. They didn't shoot great because guys were taking difficult shots. And again, not like they were being selfish, they were just taking more. Instead of just letting it happen, if this team can consistently just buy into when they play together, when that ball moves, that everybody's going to shine. And they got to be okay with that. And I think if we can do that, we play that way from the beginning, right, I think that ends up being a double-digit win.
Being able to be 500 in the ACC is pretty important, especially when you look at the ACC standings where, Adrian, just like we all suspected and all thought in the preseason, Clemson is atop the conference at 3-0, riding a 10-game win streak, which is pretty hard to believe. Of course, the other 3-0 teams, Notre Dame, who's been getting it done without Bonzie Colson, you give them a lot of credit for that. And, of course, Mike Bray losing his best player for the time being. And the Virginia Cavaliers at 3-0, of course, they had a big statement win over North Carolina. For as much as we talked about Florida State's win over the Tar Heels last week, what Virginia did to UNC on Saturday was straight up embarrassing. So
it was. I tell you what, man, the one thing about it, I give, Coach Bennett a lot of credit, man. I hate watching them play. I mean, I do. I have a love-hate relationship watching them play basketball because it's so boring, but yet it's so good. As a basketball purist, it's unbelievable how they play. But man, at times I'm just like, man, push the ball just a little bit. But you know what they do? The thing about them, if you are in the second half, if you get to that 10-minute mark and you're up, if you're down 8, it's going to be a miracle for you to beat them because they just don't play and take bad shots and they don't make dumb plays. I mean, as a basketball purist, it's a beautiful thing to watch. And just every now and then, I wish they would push the ball a little bit more.
UVA basketball is like being taken to the opera. You know it's going to be boring, but you know it's good. It's supposed to be good, so you're going to be in there. And when you leave, people are going to talk about how great it is, and you're going to be like, that was people screaming for 2 hours. What are we talking about here? So,
yeah.
but as much as we want to talk about Virginia, Clemson is the story here. I've never thought very highly of Brad Brownell. I never really understood why Ollie got shown the door at Clemson. And when you look at this team and how they've struggled over the last couple of years, I know maybe some national folks were higher than most on Clemson coming into this season, but to see what they've done, I mean, you just tip the cap. 14-1 shouldn't happen at Clemson, and Brad's got them playing really good ball right now.
He does, and I tell you what, man. I mean, back when again, it's like the years are getting farther away from me. But man, when we back, in the days of playing with Clemson, man, that used to be an awful place to play. Like you just didn't win there, and that was back in the day. I played them actually my freshman year when I played the University of Tulsa before I transferred here. We played them second round of the tournament, and that was back in the day when Rick Barnes was there, and they were tough then. And then when I came here, man, they were really good at home, back then. But I mean, it's good for basketball, man. I really like watching them. I love watching Clemson be good because again, I think it's good for the ACC. It's good for college basketball to see Clemson because, 10, 15 years ago, Clemson was a powerhouse. They were really good, maybe about 20. They were a really good basketball team. And so it's good to see Clemson basketball start to kind of get going again.
Well, I think the good news for the ACC is some of those lower tier teams have proven that they can hang on any given night. And I know that's the talking point that all the ACC coaches love to beat their chest about in their post-game press conferences. But, I mean, NC State is supposed to be awful. They beat Duke. Buzzketball can win a game or two still, even though they're projected to have a down year in Blacksburg. Wake Forest is starting to emerge from that really sleepy start. They hung with Carolina. Danny Manning is having a little bit of a disappointing year. And even Georgia Tech, who had a horrible out-of-conference play, they're 1-1 right now. They're floating above 500. The only team that you knew wasn't going to be worth anything because, well, they made the worst hire maybe in the history of the ACC last year was Pitt. And outside of that, man, you can stop me at the part where I'm wrong, but when you're taking the guy who couldn't win games in the SEC at Vanderbilt, one of 3 schools in the SEC you should be able to win games at, there's a problem.
Hey, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue with you on that one. Here's one thing I've realized, man, that like I've never understood this. I never understood why guys who couldn't win at places, then they get like the same type, either get a lateral job or like they get or they get an upgrade. I'm like, they couldn't win. I'm like, why don't you take a flyer on a young up and coming coach? Even I see this in mid-major programs where they'll take a high major guy. Prime example, and I'm going to be my man is South Florida right now. Like, Gregory, like he could win at Georgia Tech and now he's at South Florida and it's like, oh, motherfucker, and they're not very good there. I'm like, why wouldn't you take a flyer on a young up and coming young coach instead of, a guy who just couldn't win? You wanted Dayton. And again, I think sometimes, and this has nothing to do with what we've been talking about, but I'm intrigued by the hiring process now for guys is because I think one thing that gets missed a lot, and I think this is why Leonard Hamilton has been so good. Leonard Hamilton has stayed in places where he has relationships. Now, he has relationships all across the country, but if you think about it, Miami, Florida State, he was at Oklahoma, he's at Kentucky, he's kept jobs in the South, except for when he went to the NBA. And I think sometimes they hire guys that come from the middle of nowhere, and they try to, do that like they did with Mark Fox. Like, again, which is another one. I have no idea how he's kept his job this long at Georgia. He's been there forever, and they're like, I don't know. What do you think about that one?
I don't know because Georgia should never be good at basketball. I mean, for as much talk as people have had about the Tucker Center over the years, Georgia, I've seen that arena on campus. It's a dump. It is an absolute dump.
Hey, it's a dump, but let me tell you this. Their practice facilities, like embarrass ours. That's the one thing that I think sometimes people don't realize. Florida State basketball practice facilities are
awful.
Hands down. They're the worst in the ACC. I mean, like Auburn Auburn's not in the ACC, but Auburn's basketball. I mean, Virginia Tech, Clemson. I mean, you said Georgia. I mean, there's people. I mean, who've not had the level of success whose basketball facilities they dwarf ours. And so, yeah, but I'm with you, Georgia. Maybe. I mean, Tubby won there. You know what I mean? Like Tubby was the only guy. Him and Hugh Durham were the only guys that really win there.
Yeah, and here's the thing to me. The thing about Florida State basketball, and I know I showed you this tweet a little while ago, and we had a great laugh about it. One of my favorite tweets ever, Ben Swain, one of the guys for Sports Channel 8, that kind of parody website up in the Carolinas. They're really funny. If you like ACC basketball or ACC sports in general, they're really funny. You should check them out sometime. But one of their guys tweeted out a picture of Leonard Hamilton with a confused look on his face. It said, Leonard Hamilton's reaction to Jimbo Fisher saying that he didn't have good enough facilities to win.
Yeah, hey, let me tell you this, and it was like I love. Matter of fact, you need to send me that tweet. But it was but it's one of those things where I love it because I think sometimes in Tallahassee yes, facilities don't win basketball games, but it does help in being able for recruiting and things like that. And let me tell you this. Florida State's facilities, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a former player, but their facility now, credit to Stan Wilcox and the team over there working on getting the upgrade in the Tucker Center. I think some of the new stuff they've done, the locker rooms, the lounge for boosters, things like that has been incredible. It's a great thing. But I think that as far as a practice facilities, I mean, they are just bad. And I think that if Florida State, I mean, again, if they, Leonard Hamilton's taking a team that was picked to finish 11th, 12th, or 13th in the league to now to being one of the teams that's probably going to be competing for one of those top 3 or 4 spots. I just think, man, it's time that, at some level that for facilities wise, we got to be getting the pony up to kind of help get this program moving a little bit forward, take that next jump.
Yeah, it's the one thing that really needs to still be done around there. It was amazing, Adrian, and we've gone over, so we're just gonna make this last part of podcast exclusive. So, but I'll say this: it was amazing. I had a friend who works at WCTV who went to his first basketball game at the Tucker Center. This was last week against North Carolina, Wednesday night. So he goes to the Tucker Center, and when he gets a seat, he texts me and says, "Wow, this place is nice." Did you ever think in your life, Adrian, that you would hear someone who's never been to the Tucker Center send somebody a text and say, "Wow, this place is nice. I like it."
Let me tell you this. We used to call the Tucker Center. We had a thing for the Tucker Center. We used to call it the coffin. We used to call it the coffin because it was so dark. There was no lights, and we were so bad my senior year. It was like death. It was like dark and death. And we used to call it the coffin. I mean, literally, that was our name. Like, we loved playing road games just because of how bad it was. Like, we loved playing road games because of just how bad the facilities were during that time. So that's why even now, like the practice facilities, they're, I mean, but it's amazing when I go to places, when I go to Texas, when I go to University of Michigan, when I go to Ohio State, it's just like these places, like I said, I go to Georgia, I go to Auburn, Virginia Tech. These practice facilities dwarf just Florida State's. I mean, they're just way better. They're just way, way better. And again, I think they're trying to, I think Stan Wilcox and Carl Hicks are trying to move forward with making it better. But, again, we got to realize, Leonard Hamilton's been here for 60 years, third most winningest program in the ACC, and you're doing it with not great facilities, and we just upgraded Tucker Center over the last few years. And so, Again, that should give a lot of credit to him and his staff for what they're doing because, you're not going to, facilities aren't, they're not giving us that little boost when it comes to recruiting.
And for as much talk as much props as you give to Leonard, you have to give the same props, if not more, for Sue. I mean, the idea that they're using the same practice facility, they were playing in the same arena, and in women's basketball, it's so difficult because it's that club of 4 teams and everybody else. It's Stanford, it's Baylor, it's UConn, and whoever that fourth is kind of a revolving door. South Carolina's kind of taken that over recently, but it's so difficult to be in that situation there, and for her to at least even be knocking on the door of the idea that Florida State could in a couple of years join that group of teams is remarkable.
No, it is. I mean, Sue has done an incredible job. I mean, what she's done? She's done it in a very unconventional way. I mean, the way that she recruits, she's got great relationships. When they bring recruits in, I mean, they go all out. And so she's had to make it work. She's been really, really creative in the recruiting process. They built great relationships. And I think she's put together a heck of a staff, over the years, especially, I think of late, they really settled in with the staff that they have now. And so, man, she's doing this. And again, you're talking about without any of the powerhouses. You're not talking about like you said, the UConns or the Baylors or even Texas or Duke. I mean, the facilities that these guys have and just the prestige, but she's really built something. So now, I mean, now it's getting to a point to where there's players before, even over the last 3 or 4 years, there's players now that that they would have recruited that she turns away. I mean, they are signing, even this upcoming class, they're signing top 15, top 10, top 20 kids in the country. It's getting to a point where she's signing almost a McDonald's All-American, getting to a point of McDonald's All-American almost every year now. And so, again, that's credit to her. And then really, it's the last of a dying breed of people willing to stick and commit to a place. There's been many times that people have come and offered her a lot more money and she's getting paid now to move. But she's kind of believed in this vision of building something here at Florida State. And she's stuck with it. And so, that's a great deal of credit to her and who she is, and it speaks to her character.
Finally, before we run, Adrian, I know you have your ear to the ground with a lot of stuff like this. And while we're on the subject of facilities, I did want to ask you, have you heard any more about the Arena District stuff that was proposed a couple years back? FSU's website, they still have the website up. It's literally, if anybody wants to go look it up right now, it's arenadistrict.fsu.edu. It's all about FSU's master plan to kind of now that they own the Tucker Center and the facility around it, to grow it and connect Madison Street more, make kind of an expansion to College Town, but also build a new school of business, maybe get a hotel and a new convention center. And the Tucker Center's at the heart of all of it. And, of course, expanding the training facility, continued renovations, that's all at the heart of it as well. Have you heard anything new about this? Because I've seen the schematics, and they're super impressive, but it just kind of feels like it's been dormant for a bit. And it's more an FSU project than it is a booster and athletics project.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything. I know that Coach Ham has been really trying to work hard to consistently to try to raise money to eventually for them to be able to get a practice facility, here. And so that's all I've heard about it. I know they've got all the plans laid out, and for what I've heard, I haven't heard anything recently, but what I'd heard in the past, and again, this is about a year ago, that they were still planning on moving forward. But I know that with the new entrepreneurship school that they're building right downtown, I know that's kind of taking precedent over stuff. And again, they're laying out this master plan, to kind of build. So you never know. I mean, there probably could be some snags and things like that. But as of now, last I heard, which again was about a year ago, that they were planning on moving forward, but you never know. Things change, economies change. You just never know.
Might have to do some digging into that soon, because I'm rather curious about that. Adrian, we have gone way over time, my friend, but Adrian, I thank you so much for being on the show. As always, it's always a pleasure, and hopefully we're talking after the Seminoles hit 500 in conference play tonight.
Looking forward to it. Talk to you soon, bub.
All right, Adrian, thanks so much. More on the other end. Gene Williams joins us. It's Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Yeah. We don't believe what's on TV.
All aboard the Taggart train. I'm really excited about FSU football and the Willie Taggart era.
Did you hear there's also a new era happening at warchant.com?
Did Warchant get a new coach?
No, but they did get a star player. Corey Clark is joining the team. Between Gene Williams, Ira Schafel, and Corey, that's nearly 50 years of experience covering the Seminoles.
Glad I finally took advantage of that 30-day free trial offer and subscribed.
And now we get the added bonus of reading Corey Clark's insight into the Noles.
Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.
Football may be over, but your friends at For the Table are still there with you. The best happy hour in town, 4 to 7 every single day. Madison Social, Central, and Township, right there in the shadow of Doak Campbell Stadium. It's 3 completely different places with 3 completely different experiences. But you know what it is? It's the same excellent deal. Make sure you're there getting the best bang for your buck, the best happy hour at the best places to be in town. That's with your friends at For the Table over there in College Town. Let's bring the boss man in. Gene Williams, founder administrator of warchant.com. Gene, I'll go right away because I haven't really had a chance to pick your brain. This is the first time we've actually talked since we played the national title game on Monday night. What were your thoughts on it?
Well, first of all, the first half was painful to watch. I'm glad I hung out for the second half because it was great football. I mean, to have that on the heels of the Oklahoma-Georgia game the week before, I mean, that is just two tremendous games. So from that perspective, I was just happy to watch it. Was I thrilled? Alabama was in it and Georgia. Not exactly the most intriguing matchup in the world, but yeah, great football at the end. And just a couple things I really took from that. First of all, I don't think anybody in college football outside of Tuscaloosa is going to like this, but when I saw Tua, their quarterback, and I got to see him back in the spring, Ryan, I think we discussed it then. It kind of reminded me that spring of watching Jameis back in the spring because how good this kid is. And the fact now that Alabama has an elite quarterback is scary for the next couple of years because they've been winning national championships without an elite quarterback. And now that they do, it's scary for college football. And, I thought, I'll get your opinion on this, Ryan, but I thought, Georgia played extremely well. They out Alabama for over a half, which I didn't think anybody could do. But then you could see Jake Fromm was playing really well. I was surprised for the second week in a row. He played a lot better than I expected him as a freshman in this kind of environment. And they went away from him again. It's like they thought, well, Alabama's not going to score, so we're just going to shut it down, run the ball up the middle, and just, they won't be able to come back. But you should have realized early in that third quarter that it was a different Alabama team with Tua under center. And they gave away what should have been a national championship for them.
I do think it's so funny that for all the talk about, well, Jake Fromm's not the guy. He's not going to win this game for them. He doesn't have the arm. He doesn't have the experience. He doesn't have the strength. People looked over at that other sideline, and this is not to knock a guy while he's down, because I think he handled what happened on Monday night absolutely graciously. But people acted like Jalen Hurts was this next-level elite quarterback who had gone against these great, tough defenses, and he just wasn't. Georgia put pressure on him. They made him make mistakes, and they made him look bad enough to where Nick Saban thought it was worthy of pulling the trigger and going to a true freshman. And, you can say what you want about the spring, but for a guy to finally be brought in a situation like that, Gene, in a situation where you're down against arguably the best team in the country who does exactly what you do and does it to perfection the way you do it, to put him in that situation is a tall task. I think it caught Georgia a little off guard, but it's also the idea that Nick Saban is the type of guy who has built up so much clout over the last decade of football. I mean, he will more than likely go down as the best coach to ever coach at this level of the game. I think he really did a great service towards solidifying his legacy when that clock hit zero, well, a little past zero because it went to overtime on Monday night. But a lesser coach maybe doesn't feel like they have the clout to make that move. Maybe doesn't feel like they have the guts to make that decision. Nick Saban was a guy that even if that blew up in his face, knew he needed to try something, knew he needed something different. And for as much talk as there is about how boring of a coach Nick Saban can be, and I'm not here to tell you that Alabama football is sexy all the time, but we discussed this with Ira on Tuesday, Gene, to see him kind of go to the well sometimes in these title games, to see him take these risks and these chances. I think the onside kick a couple years ago is a perfect example of this. The fact that he's able to do this every now and then, and it almost always pays off, I think is just a big tip in the cap to Saban's feather, because I don't know if anybody else in a situation like that would have pulled the trigger on the guy who's been starting for him literally for the last 2 years to make a change for a kid who has not come into a game unless he's mopping up a blowout.
FSU fans are tuning into this going, oh, man, you're killing me talking about how wonderful Nick Saban in Alabama is. But, yeah, no, I agree 100%. He's the best coach in college football. May go down as the best ever at this rate because, I mean, as long as he's got the gas in the tank, he's probably going to win a couple orders. And you're right to make that, as you said, and I've seen Alabama play a few times. Tua has not played this year other than complete garbage time. He has not had a meaningful snap under center all season. Then to bring him in when you're down 13-0 to Georgia with an elite defense in the national championship. I mean, if you wrote a movie like that, people wouldn't buy it. They say the script's not believable that would happen. And then for him to come down and do it. And how about that? I'm just still amazed. You want to talk about going for it and taking chances. How about that last call? I mean, your quarterback takes a sack. You're out of field goal range. You've got a 2nd and long. Everybody else in the country, let's face it, 90% of the coaches out there thinking just get a couple short plays, get yourself in field goal range, go to the next period. What does Alabama do? They go for the jugular on that play, and then Tua executes it perfectly with Devontae Smith. Just it was incredible to watch. Again, as someone who loves the game of football, that was a lot of fun to watch.
And here's the one thing that I think is so funny, and listen, if you're sick of the Alabama talk, I think this might actually put a little bit of a smile on your face. It's amazing to me to see how Alabama is not scared to play true freshmen in certain big situations and instances, unlike one of Nick Saban's biggest, baddest disciples. To see Jerry Jeudy, to see Henry Ruggs, to see Tua get put in that game. Let's face it, this was a game that was won by true freshmen at one of the biggest programs in the country in a game that had a team that featured all sorts of upperclassmen. Georgia is going to stick around for a while, but they're going to take one heck of a step back next year because they have so much senior, junior, laced talent on that defense. And the fact that you called on true freshmen to win the game for you like that, and they stepped up and delivered in that way, I think it kind of sets an example to a lot of the rest of the programs in this country that maybe, well, I don't know if we can run this, or I don't know if we can run that. I don't know if we can throw this guy to the wolves. They just did it, and they did it on the biggest stage, and they won. And I get it. It's a machine, but I think it goes to prove a point. Guys are going into college as college ready as they've ever been coming out of high school.
Yeah, but keep in mind, too, also these guys had an entire season to kind of perfect
true.
themselves and get with the system. So they were really almost sophomores. But no, your point is well taken. You do not need to sit somebody down for a year or two and get them out there when you've got these kids. And I think it's changed a lot. Like you mentioned, they are college ready. There's constant camps. The coaching at the high school level is much better, especially if you're playing receiver, running back, quarterback. You are constantly trained at that position. So, yeah, it is definitely a difference. You're right. Another name that was a true freshman that came in, people kind of overlook because he's not a skill player, and that's Alex Leatherwood, the offensive lineman, and one of the key guys going against that stout Georgia defensive front. I don't think he gave up a pressure or a sack for a half there. And that's a guy FSU recruited there, a tackle that had to come in because of an injury, another one. You're talking their top running back, their top receiver, their quarterback, and a lineman, all on that offensive side of the football, and they all came up huge in that game, in the biggest game of the year. So, yeah, that is something to behold. But I'll disagree a little bit. I think Georgia's still going to be really good. I'll tell you, if you didn't catch Kirby Smart talking after that game, you can just see in that guy, he's got it going on. It reminds me very much of when Jimbo Fisher first started at Florida State, when he really was recruiting real well, had that drive, had stuff. You could just tell he's got control of that program, and it's going in the right direction. And they're going to have a top 2 or 3 class this year coming in. And I really like what he's doing there. It really looks like this is going to be a really top-heavy conference for a while. I think Georgia and Alabama are going to dominate their both sides for years to come.
I would tend to agree with you there. Gene, wrapping up 2017 for Florida State football, I put it this way to Ira. I want to see if you think I'm maybe trying to have it both ways here. But Florida State, to me, the Francois injury, the layoff at the beginning of the season, all of that I think kind of interests and builds up and compounds to people seeing a little bit behind the curtain, seeing what was going on and that everything was not sunshine and roses. I kind of felt like I used the analogy that it was kind of like going to the doctor's office for a scrape on your knee and finding out you had the flu and finding out that you had a serious problem that you had to have taken care of. That's what the season kind of felt like for me. It was a bunch of little problems. It was just a little dab here and there that let the real big issues boil to the surface. And even if they're not going to get fixed overnight, you know the things have been set in motion to make things better in Tallahassee.
Yeah, and it's a thing. We've written about it on numerous columns. I mean, if you go back and really look at 2015 and 16, and maybe even to a small extent 2014 with some of the defensive issues and lapses they had on that side of the ball, you could really see the writing on the wall for this team to collapse in upon itself if it had a little bit of adversity. It had some key injuries, which, obviously it had, as you pointed out. So, I mean, you could definitely see the writing on the wall. No doubt, I think everybody from the fans to when I speak to the boosters, administration, or some people around the program now, I think it's definitely a breath of fresh air. I think they're going to get right back on track. But, you may have to have a little bit it may not be a top, 5-10 type season right off the bat. I think there's some things that have to be fixed with this program. I think there's a couple areas that Jimbo Fisher and the staff did not recruit real well the last couple of years, and they need to fix some of those holes. But that's one thing I think that is the best thing that we're going to see about this staff coming in with Willie Taggart. These guys can recruit. And we all, as fans and as media, we love to get into the X's and O's and talk about play calling and da-da-da-da-da-da. But really, you get any coach to talk on or off the record, they will tell you 90% of it is the Jimmies and the Joes. And if you can get those Jimmies and Joes in there, it makes it a lot easier to make those play calls. There's a reason why Alabama's had what they said, one of the services, at least they've had, 7 or 8 number one recruiting classes in a row. Well, surprise, surprise, they're winning a national championship every other year. Well, because they have the best talent. That's ultimately going to be the biggest factor in wins and losses. And I think FSU still, they're good there, but I think they can get a little bit better. I think Taggart and the company will do that.
Looking forward, let's face it, we already want college football to be back. We already want football to be played again. I'm just happy the NFL's still going on, because if you didn't have any football this weekend, I might go through withdrawals.
And you got the Jags. How about that, buddy?
I do have the Jags. You might not want to go down that road because I might talk for 10 minutes. So, but I will say this, Gene. I'm one of those people who will immediately look for the reactions and immediately look for the not too early top 25s and immediately look for the futures and the Vegas odds. And I know you did a good bit of homework looking at what everything's got. So the national talking heads, what do you really see when you take a look at crunching all that together? What do they think's up next year?
Yeah, and I like looking at these things, not so much because I buy into a lot of it, but I like to see what the national perception is. It's always cool to see how do they perceive your program. Is it on the rise? Do they think it's going to be really good, or, what the feeling is on that? So, yeah, I actually looked before we did the show at 6 different major national media outlets all same time. They love to do this right around the national championship and come out with, they always call it their way too early top 25. And not surprisingly, Alabama's on most of them. I think 4 of the 6 had Alabama number 1. You always see right in that range. Georgia's up there, Clemson's up there, Ohio State's up there. No real surprise there. But, of course, with FSU's the interesting one. And not surprisingly, shock. Guess which service Ryan had FSU the lowest?
Which service had FSU the lowest? I know ESPN had them pretty low, so I would probably say it's ESPN because I think they had them, 22nd?
Yes, and that's just, again, it's just interesting how I'm sure the conspiracy theories will come. But anyway, they had them 22nd, but it's not that far off. The highest I saw was 16. I think that was by Athlon, and CBS had them up at 16. So, I mean, you kind of get what they're thinking. I think a little bit, and I don't disagree with any of that. I mean, it's way too early to tell on something like that. But I think there's going to be a backlash when media guys and coaches who vote in these things don't like it when they pick a team to be number 3 and they basically end up having a 500 regular season record. Makes them look bad. But the thing that jumped out at me, I'll get your take on this unless I'm completely off base here. I cannot believe what I'm seeing the rankings out of Miami. I would think it looked to me like they were exposed. We knew they weren't that good, and how they played their last 3 games kind of showed people I thought what they were. But you've got some places like, one of them had Miami number 5 in the country. And I will take that bet right now. Anybody wants to bet me, Athlon has that Miami preseason number 5. Anybody wants to take that bet that Miami finishes 5 or higher, I will take that bet right now.
I would tend to agree with you, but I understand some of the hype because I think a lot of the national people here are thinking, A, you're going to have a new quarterback who will probably be more functional than what Malik Rozier was over those last couple weeks. That's not to knock on the kid. It's a great story that he was able to win that job and fight through it. If you're just looking at that, if you take rivalry lens and all that away, it's a great story. It's a cool story. But you kind of saw through the last 3 weeks. After he got rattled, he got shaken, and he never really was the same guy, especially after Mark Richt benched him for the end of the game at Pittsburgh. He looked a lot like the guy people thought he was going to be when he was named the starter in the first place, and not the guy who took it to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish on Saturday Night Football. And I also think that defense still has a lot of very talented pieces. That linebacker core is still there, so I'm not quite selling Miami as much as you are, but I do agree. I don't think they're a top 5 team. But I'll say this: I'd be shocked if they didn't win the Coastal again.
I don't know about that. I'm not going to sell Virginia Tech short because you got to remember this year they have to go up to Blacksburg.
They are what they are till they aren't, though, Gene.
Yeah, I know. I get you. But Miami for 1 year, they beat Virginia Tech 1 year at home when they were obviously very good at home, but they were not very good on the road. And let's face it, they should have they lost to Georgia Tech, absent a fluke. They should have lost to Florida State. And then nobody's even has them in probably their top 15, 20 right now. I don't know. And they lost. I think they lost both their interior defensive linemen. I just think this will be a typical 7-8 Miami win team. They'll be maybe in the top 20, top 25 somewhere. But I don't know if I would pick them right now. I got to see what Virginia Tech's got coming back. But I think I like their coaching up there. I think they've got them turned around. But I agree with you. They are improved. They're better. But I think the media just loves to jump on any opportunity to think the U is back. I guess it sells, it gets clicks or whatever the deal is. But we see that all the time.
When I look through some of these rankings, Gene, one of the teams that it kind of turns my head to see so high is Michigan State. The Spartans are really kind of the sexy pick right now in the Big Ten. Despite Ohio State, despite Michigan, despite Penn State, despite this great year of the Big Ten that the Big Ten supposedly had last year, it was a team that was kind of off the radar that ends up getting a lot of the love. And I think that speaks a lot to what Mark D'Antonio has done because here's the thing. As soon as Jim Harbaugh got the Michigan job, and I'm not one of these people who thinks Harbaugh's done an awful job and he's so overrated. And listen, he's overrated compared to what he was brought into Michigan. But to anyone who thinks Jim Harbaugh is a bad coach, they're out of their mind. But I will say this. The narrative that, Michigan State had a good run, it's all over. The fact that Mark D'Antonio has been able to do this, be consistent, and by the way, be 2-1 against Michigan throughout this 3-year span, I think it speaks volumes about what type of coach he is. And to kind of tie it back into Florida State, I think it speaks volumes that Florida State was able to poach a guy like Harlan Barnett out of a program that's been as consistent of a winner as Sparty has been under Mark.
And that's the thing, too. I've noticed that a lot of respect's been given to the Big Ten in some of these preseason polls, and I mean, that's probably a function of how well they did in the bowls. I got to say, I'm surprised. I'm impressed when they end up 7-1 going in the bowls. I mean, that's something for a conference that was absolutely awful the year before. So I think they've getting some postseason props for that. I mean, to see Wisconsin, to see Michigan State and Penn State all in most of these polls ranked ahead of Michigan. Of course, Ohio State is. They're always in the top, everybody's top 3 or 4. It tells you something. Tells you, and I agree with you. I think Harbaugh is proven to be a good coach. I don't know if he's a great coach, and I think the problem up there is the recruiting. I mean, I think he's done well recruiting, but he doesn't have anywhere near the talent of a team like Ohio State. So when that's the case, he's going to be right up there with the other teams, all battling for that second spot. And, so far he's been kind of iffy in that. I guess he needs to do a few more sleepovers or something to land these kids.
Gene, let's pick it right now. Of the top 4 teams in college football this year, the one most likely to be back and the one most likely to not even be close.
Well, considering Alabama slipped up and they still put him in there, I think there's a little bit of and I thought the committee did the right thing, obviously putting him in that number 4 spot, but I think they're going to give any excuse to put a defending national champion or a team that's, the caliber of Alabama back in there. So I think Alabama's the team most likely to be back in there. You said the team most likely to not be?
Yeah.
Or was it? It's the one of the 4. Boy, that's a tough question. I have not seen Oklahoma's schedule. I just have to say, just based on history, Oklahoma, and I was going to say Clemson, but until somebody knocks out, like you said, they are what they are until they're not. So, I mean, I think Clemson, until somebody can knock them off in the ACC, and I don't really see anybody doing that, I'd have to say Oklahoma would be the one that won't be back next year.
I tend to agree with you. I kind of debated between Oklahoma and Georgia, because, again, with Clemson, until someone knocks him off the perch, until a Florida State or a Louisville or, heck, a Miami or a VT in the Coastal proves, hey, we're going to beat you, hey, we're going to win the ACC, you have to give Dabo Swinney the benefit of the doubt. But at the end of the day, losing Baker Mayfield, I can talk about how much I dislike the guy all I want. He made the Oklahoma offense hum. Kyler Murray is the guy who's in line to take his place, but there could be a learning curve. Oklahoma State, sure, they're going to be bringing in a new quarterback, but they're not going anywhere. Texas is only getting better. TCU is still there. Iowa State, I think, is going to, they're not going to win 11 games next year, but they're still going to be a decent squad as long as that coach is there. The Big 12 is getting better, and I think that's a tall task for somebody with a freshman quarterback. And Georgia, again, I just think that defense is going to take a little bit of a step back next year. They're still going to win. They're still going to win the East. Listen, I get it. They're going to cakewalk through most of the East, but I feel like they might have a growing pains loss or two mixed in there somewhere.
I guess I don't see that loss. I've just pulled up their 2018 schedule. The only game I could see potentially that they could lose, because it's an awful schedule, they do travel to LSU October. Maybe that's one of those defensive slugfests that LSU can do so well and lose. But they've got a cake schedule completely in the East. They're awful. They do play Auburn, but they get them in Athens. So I see them winning that game. So, if they go undefeated, even if they lose in the SEC championship, we've seen that time and time again. They will probably be in that Final Four.
Finally, Gene, I know I got to let you run, but right now, one more thing, because we haven't really talked about the Noles outside of where they are yet. What record do you consider a success for Florida State next year? I know we've kind of talked about this subject before, but if you're Florida State and you go 9-3 with one of those losses maybe being to Clemson, you split between Notre Dame and Virginia Tech, and then you have one kind of upset, stub your toe loss. Do you think Florida State fans are mad considering the coaching change and some of the shifts that's been going on around here?
I think you get a little bit more of a leeway. And then in the fact that this is a really, obviously you have Notre Dame on the schedule who you don't normally have, and you got to go up to South Bend in November. That's going to be a tough one. Obviously Virginia Tech, you roll in with one of the more difficult. You already play Miami in the Coastal, then you roll in the second, the top. So you're playing the top 2 teams in the Coastal. So I think you get a little bit more wiggle room this year. I think 9 regular season wins I think would be okay. I think people would be like, it's not what we usually get that 10-win season. think they'd be okay with that. I think when you start getting if you get into 8 wins or less, I think there'd be a little bit of some rumblings. But again, almost no matter what, absent a losing season, I don't think anybody's going to give Willie Taggart a hard time. They're going to give him a little bit of a pass. But I think if you get 9 wins or more, I think the fan base is at least okay going into the following year.
Gene, good talk. Thanks as always, my friend.
All right, buddy. Thanks for having me.
That'll do it for us, folks. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks to Gene. Thanks to Adrian for joining us. Of course, we're going to break down that basketball game tomorrow on Wake Up 4chan. Hard to believe we live in a world where Florida State is favored by 6 points over the Louisville Cardinals when that line comes out. But we're going to break that game down for you tomorrow and have plenty of other talk. Golic and Wingos up next, 97.9 ESPN Radio.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.